You are listening to PR Radio Station of America.
On a Friday morning, news alerts flashed across televisions and phones. The Trump administration announced it was ending temporary protected status for thousands of Syrians living in the United States. Anchors repeated the headline with urgency, noting that nearly 4,000 people would lose legal protection in just 60 days. Families across the country stopped what they were doing to listen. In living rooms, workplaces, and classrooms, the announcement landed like a hammer, sparking confusion, fear, and anger. The Department of Homeland Security issued a press release outlining its decision. Officials argued that Syria no longer met the conditions required for TPS. Although the nation had endured a decade of civil war and the fall of Bashar al-Assad, DHS claimed that Syrians could now return safely. Spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin declared that Syria remained a hotbed of terrorism and extremism and that it was contrary to U.S. interests to allow Syrians to remain. She emphasized that TPS was meant to be temporary, not permanent, and that the time had come to end the program. The announcement carried a chilling detail. Syrians whose TPS expired would be subject to arrest and deportation unless they left voluntarily. DHS even advised self-deportation through a mobile app, CBP Home, as if returning to a fractured homeland could be arranged with a few taps on a phone. The 60-day deadline loomed over families like a countdown clock. Parents whispered to one another about what they should do. Students messaged their friends in panic. Community organizations scrambled to set up emergency meetings. For Syrian immigrants, the statement felt like an earthquake. Many have been living in the U.S. for more than a decade, rebuilding lives shattered by bombs, chemical attacks, and disappearances back home. They had stable jobs, American-born children, and strong ties to neighborhoods in Michigan, New Jersey, Texas, and beyond. Now, they were told their welcome had an expiration date. A father in Chicago said he had just renewed his lease and now wondered if he should break it. A young woman in Houston who had applied to nursing school broke down in tears, wondering if her dream was already over. The announcement did not simply change paperwork. It instantly reshaped the lives of thousands of families and reignited a national debate. To the administration, the move signaled a return to strict interpretations of immigration law. To Syrian families, it felt like abandonment after years of building trust in a country they now called home. Within hours, immigrant advocates, politicians, and community leaders prepared to challenge the decision. The stage was set for a fierce conflict, legal, political, and deeply human, over whether Syrians would be forced to return to a homeland still gripped by violence and instability. When the news spread, Syrian families across America sat in stunned silence. For many, TPS was not just a piece of paper. It was the foundation of their stability. Parents who had worked tirelessly to provide their children with safety and opportunity now faced the possibility of losing it all. Phone lines between relatives lit up with anxious conversations. Community centers in Detroit, Houston, and New Jersey, where large Syrian populations live, began filling with people desperate for answers. Some asked whether they should pack their bags. Others asked if they would be arrested in the middle of the night. Imagine a mother who escaped Aleppo after her house was destroyed by bombs. She has lived in Michigan for 10 years, working as a seamstress, sending her children to school, and paying taxes. Her son is now in high school, fluent in English, dreaming of becoming a doctor. But under the new decision, she must prepare to return to a country where her neighborhood no longer exists. The boy has never stepped foot in Syria. He asks his mother if they will be safe there, and she has no answer. Another man in Houston works as a mechanic. His shop is a pillar of the community, serving dozens of loyal customers. He has 2 small daughters who know nothing of Syria, but everything about the U.S. school system. He wonders aloud whether his family will be torn apart if he is forced to leave while his daughters, born in America, remain. Children bear the deepest weight of the decision. A young girl in Chicago clutches her backpack and whispers to her teacher that her parents are scared. A boy in New Jersey refuses to sleep, afraid ICE agents will knock on the door. Teenagers with college applications in progress now question if their education will vanish before it begins. For them, this is not a debate about immigration policy. It is a threat to their entire identity. They feel American, Yet they are being told that their future lies in a war-torn land they barely know. Beyond logistics, the decision created a wave of psychological stress. Families who had survived trauma in Syria now relive the nightmares of displacement. Counselors at immigrant aid groups reported a surge in calls from TPS holders struggling with panic attacks, insomnia, and depression. Past wounds reopened as people remembered the bombs, the checkpoints, the disappearances of loved ones. Parents were forced to hide their own tears in front of children, trying to appear strong while silently drowning in fear. Neighborhoods with large Syrian populations quickly organized emergency town halls. Mosques opened their doors to discuss legal options. Volunteers printed flyers in Arabic and English explaining rights and resources. Lawyers offered free consultations. But even in these moments of solidarity, uncertainty lingered. Would lawsuits be able to stop the deportations? Would lawmakers step in? Or was this the beginning of an unstoppable wave of removals? For Syrians under TPS, the human toll was already clear: broken trust, shattered security, and families staring into a dark and uncertain future. The moment the DHS announcement hit, immigrant advocacy organizations went into emergency mode. Groups like the National Immigration Law Center, the ACLU, and grassroots Syrian American associations began drafting lawsuits overnight. Lawyers argued that conditions in Syria remained unsafe, with sectarian violence, collapsed infrastructure, and widespread food shortages. They said sending families back would not only be inhumane, but would directly endanger lives. Press conferences were held across major U.S. cities, with attorneys standing beside Syrian mothers and fathers, pledging to fight the decision in federal courts. In Washington, the debate escalated quickly. Democratic lawmakers condemned the administration, calling the move heartless and contrary to America's tradition of providing refuge. Some stood on the steps of the Capitol holding photos of Syrian children, urging the White House to reconsider. On the other side, Republican allies of Trump defended the decision. They argued that TPS had been abused for decades, turning temporary protection into a pathway for permanent residency. One senator said that if conditions were bad in Syria, then Syrians should seek protection closer to home, not indefinitely in the U.S. The divide in Congress was sharp, reflecting the broader national split on immigration. Federal courts quickly became the central battleground. Judges were asked to issue injunctions to halt the deportations, with immigrant lawyers presenting evidence of ongoing instability in Syria. They described bombed-out cities, ongoing clashes between armed groups, and widespread shortages of clean water and medicine. Government attorneys countered, insisting that the situation had stabilized enough for safe returns and that TPS was never meant to last this long. Courtrooms were packed with observers, journalists, and families desperate for good news. The legal fight was no longer just about Syria. It was about the future of TPS itself. Outside courthouses and government buildings, protests erupted. In Chicago, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., demonstrators carried banners reading "Protect TPS" and "Families belong here." Syrian children held handmade signs that said, "I am American too." Crowds chanted as speakers, including faith leaders and local officials, called the move unjust and cruel. At some protests, counter-demonstrators appeared, waving American flags and demanding stricter immigration enforcement. The tension in the streets mirrored the legal clash in courtrooms, with both sides claiming to fight for the future of America. By the end of the week, the issue of Syrian TPS holders had become a national flashpoint. Cable news ran nightly segments debating whether TPS was being abused or whether America was abandoning its moral responsibility. Editorials filled newspapers, some praising the administration for enforcing the law strictly, others condemning it for cruelty. Syrian families, meanwhile, felt like pawns in a larger political chess match. They watched the shouting on television, wondering if the lawyers and politicians arguing about their fate truly understood the fear they lived with every day. The political and legal battles were only beginning, and the stakes could not have been higher. The decision to end TPS for Syrians dominated television, newspapers, and social media. On conservative outlets, commentators praised the Trump administration for standing firm on immigration, portraying the move as restoring integrity to a program that had gone on for too long. Headlines read TPS abused for years, and America cannot be a forever safe haven. On progressive channels, the coverage was starkly different. Reporters stood outside Syrian homes, interviewing parents and children in tears. The stories focused on broken families, shattered dreams, and the moral responsibility of the United States to protect refugees fleeing violence. The public reaction was deeply divided. In small towns and suburbs, some Americans nodded along with the administration's logic, saying TPS had become a loophole for permanent settlement. Temporary means temporary, one supporter said at a town hall. In larger cities with immigrant communities, anger was palpable. Neighbors marched alongside Syrians, insisting that their friends and co-workers deserved to stay. Teachers spoke out, saying they could not imagine explaining to their Syrian students why their families were being forced back to danger. The debate seeped into classrooms, church meetings, and even family dinner tables, showing how immigration touched nearly every corner of American life. In cities with large Syrian populations, local officials took strong positions. Mayors of Detroit, Patterson, and Houston issued statements declaring that their cities stood with Syrian families. Some even vowed not to cooperate with federal deportation efforts, sparking legal battles of their own. Faith leaders joined in, opening churches and mosques as sanctuaries and urging parishioners to resist what they called an attack on vulnerable families. Meanwhile, county sheriffs and governors in more conservative states promised full cooperation with DHS, framing the issue as one of national security. The split between local and federal authorities deepened, adding yet another layer of tension. Media outlets highlighted individual stories that captured national attention. A Syrian nurse in Michigan who had treated patients during the COVID-19 pandemic broke down on live television, asking why she was now being told she had no place in the country she served. A college-bound student in New Jersey was profiled in a viral video, explaining how she feared being sent to a war-torn homeland she had never known. These personal narratives stirred empathy in many Americans, while critics dismissed them as emotional manipulation. The clash of stories fueled online arguments that grew louder each day. By the end of the second week, the TPS decision had become more than a policy shift. It was a cultural battlefield. For supporters, it was proof that the administration was serious about securing borders and ending programs they saw as abused. For opponents, it was proof that America was abandoning its role as a refuge for the oppressed. Polls showed the country nearly evenly split, with opinions heavily influenced by political affiliation. In Syrian households, none of these statistics mattered. What mattered was the looming deadline and the feeling that their future rested in the hands of strangers debating their worth on television. With 60 days ticking away, Syrian families across the United States lived under a heavy shadow. Each sunrise brought them closer to the deadline when their legal protection would expire. Parents circled dates on calendars, children overheard hushed conversations, and households were filled with unanswered questions. Some families debated whether to pack their belongings now to avoid the trauma of ICU raids. Others clung to hope that lawsuits or political action might buy them time. The uncertainty was unbearable, a daily reminder that their lives could be uprooted at any moment. Some Syrians considered the option of self-deportation through the CBP app, as the government had suggested. But for many, this felt like surrendering to despair. Returning meant re-entering a country where infrastructure had collapsed, where neighborhoods lay in ruins, and where sectarian violence continued to simmer. A father in Texas said he would rather risk arrest in the United States than bring his children back to a land where they might not survive. Families debated late into the night, torn between compliance and resistance. In courtrooms, temporary injunctions gave brief moments of relief. Judges paused deportations while hearings were held, sparking cheers in immigrant advocacy offices. But these victories were fragile. Appeals loomed, and the administration showed no sign of backing down. Activists urged Syrians to stay strong, to keep fighting. Still, many families admitted privately that they could not take the stress much longer. Every knock at the door made them flinch. Every phone call from an unknown number made their hearts race. False hope was as heavy as despair. Communities tried to continue with normal routines, but everything felt fragile. Children still went to school, but they carried fears their classmates could not understand. Adults still went to work, but their minds were consumed with the question of what would happen after the 60 days. Local businesses worried that if deportations proceeded, they would lose trusted employees and customers. Faith leaders organized prayer services, asking for mercy. For many Syrians, life was suspended in a cruel limbo, present in body but absent in certainty, waiting for a future that refused to reveal itself. As the deadline neared, the story of Syrians under TPS came to symbolize a larger struggle. Was the United States still a refuge for those fleeing war and oppression, or had it closed its doors in the name of security? For the administration, the end of TPS was a demonstration of power and control over immigration. For Syrian families, it was a test of resilience, faith, and survival. Parents told their children that no matter what happened, they would find a way forward. The nation, meanwhile, watched with divided eyes, some celebrating the crackdown, others mourning a humanitarian loss. The future remained uncertain, but one truth was clear: thousands of lives now balanced on the edge of history. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your story? I'll read out the most interesting ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.